So there is a great old Scottish ballad called The Parting Glass, popular in Ireland as well. It first appeared in print in the late 1700s, and it relates to an old tradition whereby somebody leaving a gathering where there's drinking, is given one more drink as they're about to ride off. This one is really beautiful. I definitely recommend you go listen to it if you haven't. But what matters for our purposes is that this lovely, almost bittersweet song of departure was definitely the template for Bob Dylan's final song on his album, The Times They Are A-Changin'. Now, there's nothing in the song, the original ballad, that indicates the narrator is never going to see these people again. Quite the opposite. It became this traditional song that you would sing at the end of a fun evening. But there's something about the music and the lyrics that's really self-reflective. And it's as if this one departure, this immediate departure, is making him reflect on himself, his life. And maybe that's part of why the song is so enduring. Sung by the likes of the great Liam Clancy way back when, to Ed Sheeran, that's this guy's name, right? And many others today. And let's just read a little bit of The Parting Glass. There's different versions of it, of course, because it's such an old song. Of all the money that ever I had, I spent it in good company. And all the harm that I've ever done, alas, it was to none but me. And all I've done for want of wit, to memory now I can't recall. So fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be to you all. Well, it turns out that lovely song was Dylan's vehicle for retribution, his second retribution song on the album, The Times They Are A-Changin'. Just like When the Ship Comes In was kind of a revenge song, in a way so is this. And it catches him at a real crossroads. You know, he's in Greenwich Village back in these days here. He's young, but he's no longer just some random folkie there. Far from it. The freewheeling Bob Dylan put him on the map. He and his record company are now putting out this follow-up album, which clearly is at least partly a statement that, yes, he is the troubadour for these times. Which was, of course, quite true, even if he would come to regret that. He looks his most Woody Guthrie-esque in this period, and on the album cover, the part of the statement is kind of like, Woody was the balladeer of the Dust Bowl. Well, here's the balladeer for this new era, for these times that are a-changin', this era of massive change and upheaval that was the 60s. It feels, anyway, like he and the record company knew this record was going to be a triumph. So he's not that far away from this Bob Dylan, the one who can't ride around in a car without fans, pounding on the window. The one who's going to be on the covers of all kinds of publications. And it was that budding fame, an incident within that caused him to feel burned and kind of lash out with this song. So he was interviewed by Newsweek, felt they got some things wrong, particularly claiming that he was estranged from his parents, which he was not. And at the end of a very topical album, he makes this very personal song. He bases it on The Parting Glass, and he uses it very interestingly to kind of say goodbye and farewell to his younger self, less famous self that is now being left behind. And he's looking back in that same wistful way and being retrospective as in the original, but he's so young. It's kind of an odd thing. This is basically his My Way. It was an odd kind of a song to write and record when you're that young. No less an authority on the song My Way than Frank Sinatra picked up on this, because many, many years later, he requested that Dylan play this, one of his lesser songs, really, in terms of fame, in terms of hit status. He requested that Dylan play it at the televised tribute to Frank Sinatra on the occasion of his 80th birthday. Here's a blurry scene from that. And that was the only song sung that night that wasn't one of Sinatra's. But let's jump back from 1995 to 1963 and 64. Album recorded in 63, released January 13th of 64. And anyway, this kind of gentle diss track really is the first inkling of the antagonistic relationship Dylan's going to have with the media. It starts off hewing very close to the original. The first line is almost the exact same as in The Parting Glass. The first stanza is about saying goodbye, after drinking, but the bottles are done, we've killed each one, and the table full and overflowed, and the corner sign says it's closing time, so I'll bid farewell and be down the road. Didn't read the whole stanza, by the way, but, great couplet there. But the bottles are done, we've killed each one. Notice in the next pair of lines that rhyme, I'll skip the rhyme scheme overall, but in the next two lines that rhyme, and the corner sign says it's closing time. Like we've said so many times before, Dylan's lines often don't just match up at the end, like with a typical rhyme. So here, the hard C of corner and closing occupy the exact same position in the two lines, thereby making the two lines work that much better together than they would have otherwise. The Parting Glass touches very briefly on the idea of past romances. Dylan deep dives more than that and has some great flowing lines as he does so. Oh, every girl that ever I touched, I did not do it harmfully, and every girl that ever I hurt, I did not do it knowingly. But to remain as friends and make amends, you need the time and stay behind. And since my feet are now fast and point away from the past, I'll bid farewell and be down the line. Notice here, top of the screen, in these three lines, there's two rhymes. Normally, you'd expect two rhymes in four lines, but Dylan's got, but to remain as friends and make amends, you need the time and stay behind. Time and behind don't rhyme perfectly, but it works. That line rhymes internally, and that's how that third line adds another pair of matching sounds all by itself, and it just kind of works and flows in conjunction with what came before it. And then look at how the very next couplet does something related but different. And since my feet are now fast and point away from the past. Great little rhyme there, very tight, right? But you have feet fast, point past. So a pair of sounds, but not a pair of rhymes in each of the two lines. And yes, what I just said, rhymes. Let's just rattle off the next stanza as we look at a glimpse of future Dylan here. Oh, every foe that ever I faced, the cause was there before we came, and every cause that ever I fought it full without regret or shame. But the dark does die as the curtain is drawn and somebody's eyes must meet the dawn, and if I see the day, I'd only have to stay, so I bid farewell in the night and be gone. Beautiful flow to that, obviously, and it's interesting that now he's talking about former enemies as opposed to former lovers. And it's part of that life's retrospective that we talked about. And this is a man in his early 20s, but he does it anyway, and he does it so well that it really does feel like something written by an 80-year-old looking back. The first four lines here work really well together, and notice there's only one rhyme, but there's so much more going on, of course, as you can imagine. So, came and shame, that's the rhyme, but notice that every ever, that pair shows up in the first and the third line. That works in conjunction with the F sound at the start of a word. We have a foe, faced, fought, fought again, full. You have the phrase, fought it full. Earlier you have foe that ever I faced. Move on to a picture of Dylan here while I read how well those four lines work then, because of those reasons. Oh, every foe that ever I faced, the cause was there before we came, and every cause that ever I fought it full without regret or shame. The very next line has, but the dark does die, dark does die. And that kicks off a section of lines where the D sound takes over and becomes the most important thing. And dawn is juxtaposed with day in a pair of lines right on top of each other, but let's skip the rest of the technicalities in this stanza and just talk about how this second half of it does a great job of giving that feeling of, it's so late that if I don't leave now, I shouldn't bother going home. We've all been there. Remember, darkness is dying, and that's been established. Somebody's eyes must meet the dawn, and if I see the day, I'd only have to stay. So I'll bid farewell in the night and be gone. Yeah, in this last shred of night before the sky starts lightening. Good opportunity to mention that every stanza in this song ends with a different line, but a variation on the same theme. I really like how you're surprised each time with that, as opposed to the predictability of, hey, here's the refrain again, you know how this line ends. Here's Dylan singing the song we're talking about in its live debut, and he starts off the next stanza, penultimate stanza, with something that's a recurring theme in his music. Oh, every thought that's strung a knot in my mind, I might go insane if it couldn't be sprung. But it's not to stand naked under unknown eyes. It's for myself and my friends, my stories are sung. I love how early in Dylan's songwriting, how early in his career, this theme pops up of having just too much in his head, like his head is going to burst. Reminds me of one of my favorite Dylan couplets. Well, you know I need a steam shovel, mama, to keep away the dead. I need a dump truck, baby, to unload my head. Oh boy, speaking of things that remind us of future Dylan lyrics, there's also this thing about standing naked, and of course that's going to make us think about the line, "But even the President of the United States sometimes must have to stand naked." Wow, so just this one part of the song makes us think of three different things in the lyrics of his upcoming Electric Explosion. The final line in the four that we're considering here, "It's for myself and my friends, my stories are sung." That's gotta be the most directly self-referential lyric up to this point in his career. And that's not an easy thing to say when we have two full albums behind us, counting this song, plus Song to Woody, but I went through all of them, and it's true. I'm not just talking about Dylan talking or singing about himself. He does that a lot. He inserts himself into all kinds of songs, but usually it's this melding of Bob Dylan with the character slash narrator of the song. In this line, it's Bob Dylan, the recording artist, talking about himself as a recording artist. Let's actually skip the rest of this stanza because that's enough time spent on it, and I think all of that was worth pointing out. So then you get to the final stanza, and it's great, of course, but it is. It's where the whole my way, in your face world vibe really comes out. "Oh, a false clock tries to tick out my time, to disgrace, distract, and bother me, and the dirt of gossip blows into my face, and the dust of rumors covers me. But if the arrow is straight and the point is slick, it can pierce through the dust, no matter how thick. So I'll make my stand and remain as I am, and bid farewell and not give a damn." And I think you can see there why Frank Sinatra was so attracted to this song. And of course, he wasn't the only one. Somebody else is Patti Smith. She likes a lot of what Dylan did, obviously. But on the occasion of one of his many honors, and I can't remember which one, but one of the many, many ones that he didn't show up to, I think it might have been the UK Music Hall of Fame. I don't know. But anyway, they had a video message from the great Patti Smith in this compilation of statements from all kinds of musicians, and she chose to recite those lyrics, the end of this stanza, which is the end of the song. And the end of the album, the historic The Times They Are A-Changin' album. We won't zero in on too much in particular when it comes to this last stanza, but just a few things that have to be mentioned. The false clock, that's a wonderful device. You know, it's so old world in that way that so much of Dylan's writing is, feels 19th century. But just think about that alone, a false clock. A clock cannot be false, right? Or else it's unreliable. And the whole point of a clock is that you can rely on it to tell the time. It established order, a watch face, a clock face. That was something you trusted implicitly. It was this, mechanism of ordering the universe. Like I said, it was this instrument of order, which is why another great 20th century artist, Salvador Dali, realized, like Dylan, although before him, to be clear, that there's something almost unnerving about a clock that isn't what it's supposed to be, like that one, like these. I'm using the word clock loosely, but whether it's your pocket watch or the grandfather clock, that face is supposed to be impassive, right? Rigid, straight, not warped like this, and it's supposed to always tell the truth, shouldn't be false. What does that false clock try to do? It tries to tick out Dylan's time, tries to tick out my time. T in tries, T in tick, T in out, T in time, all in the second half of that line. T, 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 T. What does that remind you of? A stopwatch, a clock. The very sound of time ticking that he's talking about. Not saying he did that on purpose, and I'm not saying he didn't do it on purpose either, but I'm saying it's there. And that was all just the first line, so I'm going to surmise for the rest. I do think this final set of lines is the strongest. And the predominant device that we see in it is this metaphor. It's a great one, this device where gossip and rumor, there's this physical, annoying, dirty, dusty substance, the dirt of gossip, the dust of rumors, this arrow of truth that he kind of hints at. It can pierce through, quote, it can pierce through dust no matter how thick. Maybe his obsession with Woody Guthrie, the Dust Bowl balladeer, is how he happened upon this device, don't know. Either way, it's part of what attracted other musical greats, icons to the song. Dylan at this time is already famous, but nowhere near as famous as he's going to become. But he already knows there are certain things about this he doesn't like. And he looks back while briefly looking ahead and defiantly claiming that he's not going to let that alter who he is. He's going to stay true to himself, but as a person and as an artist, he's not going to let the game change him. And that's pretty ironic since at this very time, as he closed out this album, he was in the middle of changing the game. Restless Farewell, Bob Dylan's Parting Glass, Bob Dylan's My Way, Bob Dylan's closer for a chapter of his life and for the album The Times They Are A-Changin'. Thanks.